So again, obvious, but a really critical point, often missed. The second thing is just to make sure you know what your goals are for the campaign, and really, essentially, what it's going to take to win. And sometimes you have a very clear idea of what that will be. You know how many votes it's going to take, and where those votes need to come from, or how much money needs to be raised in order to, to qualify for the ballot, or whatever it might be. But you have to have a good handle on what your goals are. And sometimes you have to just develop a theory of what that is going to look like. Often, I mean, I don't know, what percentage of the time would you say you have to develop a theory based on, your experience and understanding rather than know with certainty?
100%.
There you go, okay. There is no certainty, all right, well, good point. So the things that we know about online tools, the parts of the campaign that they'll be supporting are your communications objectives. And these days, that includes, it's going to include paid, earned communications, earned media, paid media. We all have been through, watched campaigns, developed crowdsource ads, for example, and vote them up, and then engage their supporters in funding them. So communications, online will support fundraising, volunteer mobilization, internal communications. Those are all different parts of the campaign that online tools will support. And you need to understand which of those you're going to prioritize and what the goals are for each of those. And again, it all ties back to what's the plan. How is it that you plan to win that campaign?
And just to add real quick, what Larry's trying to get across to you is that you integrate this as seamlessly as possible into your broader planning efforts. So all the things we talked about in the earlier part of this class, deciding what aspects of your biography to emphasize, prioritizing your issues, figuring out your advantages and disadvantages vis-a-vis your opponents, figuring out which voter groups geographically and demographically to prioritize. This all is part of the planning process that he's referring to. We've talked about it earlier without a specific reference to online campaigning, but it's part and parcel of the point that he's making to you. Yeah.
Well, and again, for some of you, this might just sound, just won't resonate, but 10 years ago, right now, we all know that the web is integrated into everything. I mean, even mobile. I mean, everything. It's all integrated into the campaign at every level. But when I first started doing this, the web was this other thing. So we've got our fundraising folks, we've got our communications team, we've got our research team, we've got all these different parts of the team, and then I guess we need the web team. And there was no thinking that the web team had to interface with all. It was like a separate thing. And that's not the case anymore, and so I don't think to make that connection, but that's definitely a critical point. The web has to be integrated. The web team has to be integrated with all those parts of the campaign and in the planning process. The third thing, audiences. Who are you trying to reach? And again, this is going to be driven by the plan, driven by your goals. Who's going to matter in the success of the campaign? Most campaigns are going to have communications needs that will focus on media, voters, and core supporters, and there may be others, influential coalition partners and other folks that you'll need to engage as well. But basically, you need to understand the audiences and how they spend their time online and how you plan to communicate with them. Online, as Dan's discussed, you can segment, you can deliver different messages. Reinforce your messages with multi-channel, so you've got phones and mail and targeted ads. These days you can say, well, I want to communicate with Christian conservatives who care about the environment, or I want to communicate with liberals who go to church, or what. I mean, you can slice and dice in many different ways in order to mobilize your audiences, and depending on the amount of money that a campaign has to spend, you might do more or less of that. I think the critical thing with audiences gets back to something that Dan said just a few minutes ago, which is the real power for most campaigns for your online, the online component of your campaign is going to be mobilizing your core supporters and making them feel like they're a critical part of the success of the campaign, that they're insiders with the campaign. And you want to do that on your website and how the website, what you're showing, the homepage and the mean, basically, the website is a great place for you to show the supporters who are heavily engaged in the campaign. Same thing with Facebook. You know, your email organizations that are sophisticated about this will have their mass email lists and communicate, you know, broadly with their supporters, but then will also communicate, you know, in much more precise ways with insiders who are important to the campaign because they're the core evangelists for the campaign. And then the organizations that are very sophisticated will have a separate list, which is a strategic plan around how they use one-on-one email communications. Most organizations don't do that, but it's if you sit back and you say, who are the 100 people, you know, in the state of California or in my district that I need to have a relationship with and want to have an email relationship with, and plan to build and to reach out to those people and build that deep relationship with them, you're much more likely to do that and to, you know, to be successful in developing those relationships. So anyway, email is just another example of how you can you use the tools to build relationships with people that communicate that they're an important part of the campaign. You see this all the time now. You know, the campaigns will announce on Twitter or on Facebook or via email, you know, before they even go to the media, important news for the campaign, and all that's intended to pull the insiders in and make them feel important. I mean, an example, we'll get back to this when we talk about Pinterest, but, you know, one of the things that Mitt Romney did on Pinterest was basically go out and say, you know, who do you think our vice, well, actually, was that Pinterest? Or, anyway, he went out and he asked his supporters, you know, who should the vice presidential, you know, who should I pick? It doesn't matter that that's going to have zero impact whatsoever on, you know, on his decision. He's doing that in order to make people feel like they're an important part of the campaign. If you do that too much, then, you know, people aren't going to feel, they're going to feel jaded about that, and so, you know, the more that that's a sincere ask, the better off you are. Yeah.
To what degree do you think that's already happened with email? I mean, I may have like oversubscribed myself to too many issue campaigns online, but personally, like, I've gotten to the point where I don't read any of them. Yeah, it's almost like it translates to junk mail in my head. And these are like issues that I care about, but I'm just so inundated with emails from these organizations that it's become just an automatic delete. And so to what degree do you risk that in your campaign?
It's a huge problem. I mean, for campaigns, for organizations, I do exactly. First thing I do in the morning is go through my email and basically, I don't delete them, I pretend that I've read them. I just go through, you know, I want everything to look like it's been opened. It's a huge problem. 5 years ago, our open rates were, you know, 20, 22%, and we felt terrible about that. You know, these days, if you're cracking 10% or 12%, you know, you're feeling
you can actually gauge that.
Yeah, you can see the open rates, the click-through rates. So it's a huge problem, but it reinforces what I'm saying, which is that if you develop email communications that are focused on building relationships with your core supporters, you know, and some of those messages are coming one-on-one, or they're clearly sent to people who are who are more essential to the campaign. Those are emails that you're going to read. And no, please.
Just a couple of things to follow up on that. A little, one more specific and a little bit broader. Remember last week when we were talking about news media, when we talked about self-discipline, the boy who cried wolf? You send out too many releases, reporters stop reading them. Well, the same thing exists on email. When you send out traditional direct mail through snail mail, it costs money. Email doesn't cost anything. So your natural tendency is to say, well, I can't decide whether to send out these 10 emails or these 10 emails. I know, I'll send out all 50. And the logical conclusion, when someone sees 50 emails from my campaign, is just to delete all the way through. And if you think about your auto-deletes, you're more likely, just as human nature, to take a quick look at something that you don't see as regularly. If something shows up in your email, in your inbox once every few days, rather than several times a day, it's more likely to pique your curiosity. So it demands, to an even greater degree, the same kind of self-discipline we talked about in press releases when it relates to emails, even to your strongest supporters. Remember what we talked about on the very first day, the importance of prioritizing. Even your strongest supporters don't care as much as you do. And you can't tell them everything you want them to know. You have to tell them the most important things. And if they decide they want to know everything you know, they can go to your website. It means self-control with emails. The second thing, and we're going to get to this a little bit later, but it's worth raising now because it's exactly the right question to ask, Allie. This is a terrific way. We've talked about this a little bit when it comes to offline campaigning. This is a terrific way, perhaps one of the best ways, to employ your most saintly saints. What you ask your saints to do, among other things, is to forward your emails. To take off the FW in the subject line, and to write even a sentence or a phrase up at the top of the email, and say, hey Danielle, I know you don't normally read these things, but this one is a really important one. And what you're doing is you're borrowing the biographical credibility of your saints. Because 10 emails from the campaign might get deleted, but if you get an email from somebody who you know and who you respect, you're that much more likely to read it.
Well, yeah, we'll come back to that because there's some really significant shifts in how the web is and content is being structured that relate to that very point. The one, I mean, I agree with what you said about the importance of being judicious about how much email you send, but on the flip side of that, and I'm always on that side, but there are a lot of campaigns that you will see that will not approach email in that way. And for the smart ones, it's because they are stepping back and they're making those decisions based on their goals and their plans, and they're using email more as they're using it to raise money, and they're tracking their rates in a very sophisticated way. And they know if they send them out, 2 times a week versus 3 times a week, how that impacts the rates, and they can project that out. You've got A/B test, split testing, so we're sending out an email at 10 o'clock in the morning that goes 50% with this subject line and 50% with this subject line, comes back, and we send that to 9% of the list or 5% of the list, and then the one that performs the best, that's what goes out to the rest of the list. And so very sophisticated mechanisms are being used to track the success of the email in order to maximize the fundraising, because the goal there is to raise as much money as possible to do a media buy. Now, I wouldn't do, I would probably have a different approach, but that's, depending on the campaign.
I mean, what I've seen, and Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, is the campaigns that are the most sophisticated at this sort of test marketing, for lack of a better word, do it on a relatively limited basis. Let's say you've got a 10,000 person email list. You don't send out one test to 5,000 people and one test to the other 5,000 people. Maybe you do 50 apiece. And you see which comes back, and if one comes back at a significantly greater number, that's the email you send out more to the broader list. The other point, which you touched on, which I think is important following up, goes back to our ongoing conversation about targeting. While you're being disciplined and judicious on your emails, the other thing you're doing is you're targeting. You're not sending every email to every person on your list. For those people who've demonstrated to you that they care particularly about one issue, well, they get one set of emails. For those who feel a commonality with you because you said something in your biography, they get a different set of issues. They get a different set of emails. So send out emails to your heart's content, but target different messages to different